Kale. My name is Kim, and I'm a mental health professional in Atlanta. And I was asked today to real briefly share with you a little bit about how counseling can go hand in hand with the work that you do as FCA leaders. And so, what we're going to do is a really quick, kind of high level overview of when to refer to counseling, how to build that referral network, how to make those referrals to counseling, and how counseling might be helpful in the work that you're doing. So, first off, I'm going to give the caveat that each of you are frontline workers. You are on the ground with the students that you're working with, and so you are invited into places with these students that are really intimate, and they may not share a lot of these things with other people in their lives. And so that's part of the reason that we're having the conversation that we're having today. And I'm going to give you just a little bit of homework before we start. And that homework is going to be after our time today, after you go through this training. I'm going to encourage you to go back to your area directors and have some conversations with them specifically around what they do and how they have these conversations around mental health, and really specifically what they do in their areas around crisis situations with suicidality or self-harm and things like that, and to map out a plan before you find yourself in one of those scenarios. So as we dive in today, a couple of reasons that I would make a recommendation that you want to try to connect your students with counseling services with, as I mentioned kind of in that caveat, very, very specifically, if someone mentioned suicidality or thoughts about suicide or self-harm, we want to get them connected to those mental health resources ASAP. A couple other reasons that I would recommend counseling to those students would be abuse, eating disorders, any significant loss that they've experienced. I know a lot of the students that we're walking through have just been through a lot, and they're walking through a lot right now. If they have shared with you that at a previous point in time, maybe they've received a mental health diagnosis, it might be great to ask them if they're kind of following up with their team or taking medication, and just find out a little bit more there. And then another main reason would be if they're sharing with you that they experience anxiety or depression and it really seems to be impacting them in a significant way. We want to try to help get those students connected to services. So that would be when. Then how and who are we making that referral to? So if you're an FCA leader at a middle school or a high school, and you've got kind of access to a school counselor, first off of how I would recommend building that referral network is build a relationship with that school counselor and find out how they get students passed to them and who they're referring to out in the community for those services. And then a couple other ways to build that referral list that you as an FCA leader could have of mental health professionals in your area would be talking to churches that you're either a part of or that you partner with, and finding out if they've got people either in-house or therapists that they really trust and recommend in their area. I would encourage you to ask your network, find out if you've got therapists that you're friends with, or people have friends that are therapists, and I would say therapists oftentimes highly value knowing other therapists that they can make referrals to. And so those would be just a couple of ways you can start to build out a referral network. There's a lot of other ways, but those are just a couple ways. And so how are we going to make that referral to therapy for the students that you're working with? First, a caveat with that is if you're working with anyone under the age of 18, something to be aware of is that if they are going to go seek out a therapist that is in their community, they are going to need to have their parent or guardian signed an informed consent. And so how you're making that referral, one specific thing that might need to be the first place to start is having a conversation with that student about having a conversation with their parents. And so you might be able to sit down in those conversations with them and their parents, or you might be doing a lot of empowering them of how to have those conversations with their parents to try to get access to services and making sure those forms are signed by the correct people. But a couple ways that kind of once either parents are on board or you've recommended it to students that I would say you want to make that referral is trying to talk a little bit about counseling and really normalizing and trying to help reduce the stigma around counseling with those students, and then being able to provide them a list of a couple of therapists. And that's why we talked about first of how to build that therapy referral network list. So giving them a couple of names of therapists that they might be able to see in their community. And the last thing we're going to cover today is how can referring students that you're working with to counseling be an asset to the work that you do as FCA leaders. And so I would say the first way that it can really be a benefit to you is being able to add somebody else to the team and hopefully alleviating this feeling that you feel that you need to be an expert in everything, specifically around mental health topics, and knowing that this student has someone that's trained and that is walking alongside them. And as I mentioned, because parents are aware, we're just building in that support network for those students. And so as they're walking through experiences and challenges in their life, we have more and more people that are in their lives with them. And another way that having counseling kind of connected to the work that you're doing with FCA is that hopefully we can just continue to reduce the stigma around mental health and really making counseling such a normal thing. So hopefully that starts to get your minds thinking a little bit about mental health and how that ties into the work that you do as FCA leaders. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity just to speak to you guys for just a little bit today. All the best.